Jazz emerged in the early 20th century as America's music. It was carried around the globe as a distinctively American tradition. In addition, jazz-inspired music became the popular music of its day, at least until the rise of rock and roll in the 1950s. This music did not just appear out of thin air, and in this video we look at a few examples of music that influenced the directions that jazz would take. Some elements of jazz can be traced back to the music of West Africa and to the New World voodoo music that migrated from the Caribbean to southeastern coastal cities such as New Orleans. Roots of jazz might also be found in folk and work songs of blacks and whites, in the theatrical productions of minstrelsy, in ragtime piano music, brass band music, and most importantly in the blues, a most important African American folk tradition. Although jazz was influenced by all of these musical currents, it was most strongly shaped by the African American ones. Some would hold that it all goes back to Congo Square in 19th century New Orleans. There, Americans of African descent were allowed to meet, sing, and dance, as seen in the images on your screen. We have already heard one work song as we listened to Leadbelly sing Pick a Little Cotton. As sharecropping became less prominent, work songs were kept alive by chain gangs. These were prisoners assigned with a task, such as clearing a field or building a railroad line. In fact, it was to prisons, such as the Mississippi State Penitentiary, that ethnomusicologists went to record work songs in the mid-20th century. If you saw the film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, you heard some of these work songs, as produced by T-Bone Burnett. Another African American musical tradition that would influence jazz was the spiritual. Spirituals are songs that were sung by African American slaves. They generally feature lyrics that compare the plight of the African American to the ancient Hebrews, who were enslaved by the Egyptians. Make sure you listen to the performances of the work song Rosie and the spiritual Swing Low Sweet Chariot on your YouTube playlist. Blackface minstrelsy was the most popular theatrical entertainment among 19th century European Americans. Minstrels were productions staged by whites who blackened their faces and acted the parts of the stereotypical African American characters of the day. Audiences might see a good-natured Uncle Tom, a dangerous black dandy, or a motherly mammy figure. Jokes were told and dances such as the African American cakewalk were performed. Many of the most popular songs of the day came from these minstrel shows. Stephen Foster, sometimes called the father of American music, wrote many popular songs, many of which were used in minstrels. You might know his Camptown Races or Old Susanna, for example. The tune on your playlist starts out with the words "Way Down on the Suwannee River." It also goes by the title Old Folks at Home. This was a song performed in many minstrels. Old Folks at Home romanticizes the experience of the African American in the Southeast. Its singing persona is an African American who now lives in the North and is reminiscing about what it was like with the old folks at home. The song's more racially charged words have been changed, and it has been adapted as the state song of Florida. So although minstrelsy is in our eyes today at the best politically incorrect and for many people racist, some of the songs that have been associated with minstrelsy remain popular nodes in American culture. Of the music discussed in this video, ragtime had one of the strongest influences on jazz. Ragtime refers to music with a syncopated or ragged melodic line, something like this. This is heard over a steady accompaniment played by the left hand on the piano. And so on and so forth. Although the early 20th century saw ragtime bands, ragtime was most famous as a type of piano music. The syncopated melody in the right hand was generally played in an upper register. This syncopation is what becomes a defining feature of jazz. The pianist's left hand, playing that boom chuck type accompaniment, was normally played in a lower register, as you heard. As such, ragtime generally had a homophonic texture, melody plus accompaniment. In addition, ragtime is almost always in duple meter. Now, there were many pianists who played ragtime at the turn to the 20th century, but none was as famous as Scott Joplin. Born in Texas in 1867, Joplin moved north to Missouri and then finally to New York City. One of his most famous rags is the Maple Leaf Rag from 1899. Make sure you listen to it on the YouTube playlist. The recording of Maple Leaf Rag on the playlist is even more significant because it was made by Scott Joplin himself. Joplin recorded 7 of his tunes for piano rolls for the popular player pianos of his day. Band music was ubiquitous in late 19th century America. Every small town had a town band, and in places such as New Orleans, brass bands were particularly popular. These small bands featured the brass instruments, but might also include a double bass or a guitar to provide a rhythmic foundation, or a woodwind instrument such as the clarinet. These groups played for concerts and also in bars. In New Orleans, they also played and still play together for funeral processions. There's a representation of such an event on your screen. This is from the James Bond movie, Live and Let Die, and you can watch a clip from this film on your YouTube playlist. These processionals typically feature slow tempo, funeral type marches, followed by lively and festive celebratory dances. If you've ever heard "Oh, When the Saints Go Marching In," you know what I mean. You've heard a brass band piece. One of the most famous New Orleans bands of the early 20th century was the Buddy Bolden Band. This band was led by the clarinet player Buddy Bolden, and they're sometimes credited with having invented jazz. It's said that their band combined the sounds of ragtime with the blues. Unfortunately, no recordings exist of his band, and so we'll really never know exactly how they sounded. But we do have a good idea of how the blues sounded. We turn to the blues in our next video.